Welcome back. We'll resume the Bellingham City Council committee meetings. The next committee is Community and Economic Development, and that committee is chaired by Councilmember Pinky Vargas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am joined on the Community and Economic Development Committee by fellow council members April Barker and Roxanne Murphy. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We have a presentation today regarding the improvements to the rules and procedures for approving special events. Our special events such as parades, block parties, festivals, races, and demonstrations define community character and provide economic benefit, recreational opportunities, and social interaction. The city does not currently have a comprehensive set of rules and procedures for reviewing special events, resulting in a lack of efficiency and consistency among city staff and event organizers. Staff will introduce a project to adopt a new ordinance and associated resource guide and the fee resolution establishing the rules, resources, application procedures, and the fees to facilitate the city's review and approval of special events. And to give us an overview of that is Darby Cowles from Planning and Community Development. Thanks, Darby.
Thank you, Councilmember Vargas. I thought it was ironic that we had this scheduled for 2 days after one of the largest special events that we've ever hosted. So that is an ironic and appropriate coincidence. The idea of having a special event ordinance has been discussed for a while, so we're excited to be able to bring it forward because we do have special events and they happen, but the way that we're doing it right now isn't very predictable for the community, and they're very important for us from an economic development, community identity, and recreational and social approach. So when we're talking about special events, we're talking about events that are held in a public place, and that means a city park, a street, a sidewalk, a right-of-way, or other city property. It's a special event if it has a substantial impact on that place, so that's an impact beyond just the normal use of that place, or if it requires substantial city services beyond what's normally provided there, crowd control, traffic control, etc. The approach on this project, we started by conducting interviews with stakeholders. We talked to Whatcom Events, Makeshift, Downtown Bellingham Partnership, the Chamber of Commerce, Recreation Northwest, Boundary Bay, Chuckanut 50K, a lot of the other running advocacies, and then also with key city staff to figure out what's working, what's not. When we're creating new processes, what we don't want to do is add a bunch of complicated layers that it's going to make something worse than it is now. So what we found out is that things are pretty simple the way we do it, so let's keep it that way. But what is needed is additional predictability and resources for the community to be able to know what the expectations are when they do need to get a permit, who else they need to talk to in the community, that sort of thing. Another key finding was just about the fees. There was some uncertainty about what's being charged, when, why, so we want to make sure that's all clarified through a fee resolution. And then also just some inexperienced applicants may really underestimate what it takes to pull off a special event. So we wanted to do our best to make sure that we were providing information so that people do know that it is quite an undertaking for some of these things. We did present the findings and a draft to the Recreation Northwest Summit this past fall, and also emailed the draft documents that you have in your packet to everyone who was interviewed. So it's been a good way to get some feedback early before we adopt a new ordinance to make sure that everyone is in support. And what we keep saying too is it'll be a work in progress, and we can make changes periodically through the years as we go. There's a couple exceptions that we're proposing as part of the new permit process. Some are transfers over to our existing parade code about wedding and funeral processions, student activities, government activities, etc. Events that are in parks that don't trigger the need for other departments to review them or don't require substantial city services don't need to duplicate what they're already doing with the Parks Department. So we've been working really closely with Leslie and her team on making sure we're not, again, adding unnecessary layers. And then for free speech and First Amendment events like protests, marches, demonstrations, we're not going to incorporate fees or insurance requirements for those. We will continue to treat those how we do now, which is require review to make sure that they're safe and that we can plan for them, but to not impose any time requirements for the permit or any fees. And then we also have an existing exemption for block parties that we're going to keep propose to keep that way. So keep it simple. The application process, the main thing, again, to create a more streamlined process is to make sure that when somebody submits a permit, we're flagging the departments that need to review it so that they automatically find out. Right now, our police might find out because of a liquor permit or something like that. So we just want to establish a efficient and consistent way of notifying everyone. The fee schedules, communities do this in a lot of different ways, but in the interest of simplicity and accessibility, we wanted to set a pretty low review fee for these events. So we're proposing $107, which is a standard fee. Now, the differentiation that we've worked through for your consideration is to charge a different fee for commercial events versus events that are free and open to the public. So you will see in the ordinance that that's defined. If there's a registration requirement or an entry fee or admission, then it would fall under the commercial. If it's a free event, then it would be subject to that reduced rate. And again, it's because we want to make sure that we're encouraging and not putting any limitations and challenges for those community events. That would apply to personnel charges as well under this draft fee resolution. So personnel charges are things like police time and public works time if it's required. And a big change under this would be we're going to make sure and let people know well in advance what an estimate of that cost would be so that they can plan accordingly, adjust their event if they need to, because usually those end up being more of the substantial costs from the city's side of things. You'll also notice that there's a proposed exception for the ski to sea parades in the fee resolution. That's because when we were going through the research process, it became very evident that that is a very clear anomaly in as far as the long-standing nature of that event and what is required from the city in order for that event to happen. So after going through a number of different alternatives, we're proposing that we just continue to be a sponsor, continue to support it, not charge personnel fees in exchange for being recognized as a sponsor. The guide, I'm not going to go through these, but we have a number of resources available and links to the community, and that's going to be, again, continually under improvements and updates. So at this point, we just wanted to present the idea, see if you support bringing the ordinance and fee resolution forward for an official vote in February. And in the meantime, if you have any suggestions or edits that can improve the drafts prior to that, we would welcome and appreciate that.
Thank you, Darby. Councilmember Murphy.
Well, I'm the absolute geek who has worked on this before for another municipality. And I'm really excited that we're doing this. It provides such better certainty for the special event producers to know exactly what their resources are, who to call, how to proceed, and some assurances about time frame, because a lot of times these events come together so quickly and they really need these assurances in a fast way. And I also just wanted to say, one of the things that I've learned in going through this is that for the other municipality, we were responding to concerns that we got about events, and then we came out with a fee schedule, and we did all this outreach, but the event producers themselves that commonly worked on these events were upset that we didn't engage them as you have. So I really appreciate that we've done outreach to the exact organizations that do this very work. And the other just simple thought, one thing that we did was there was just a regularly standard set meeting at whatever frequency, where it was the fire department and the police department, parks department, and that was then used to really get the permits out faster. Just a suggestion.
Councilmember Barker.
So you followed, we just recently did the fees for the parks, and the commercial versus not commercial, if somebody's paying a fee versus not, I think that's following almost exactly what the Parks Department did, and I think it's helpful as we go through and do other fee schedules that we're following a similar pattern, so somebody doesn't have to go and research a little bit more on how planning does it versus parks. So I would just maybe go back and confirm that I'm pretty sure you did do the exact same thing, and then if we were to do anything further in other departments, maybe keep with that same theme Thank you.
I think this is really fantastic. Thank you guys for taking the initiative to do this. I think you are right. For predictability and consistency, it's going to make things a lot easier for people in Bellingham. I am particularly pleased that you reached out to the community and the event organizers before you put this proposal together. I think that says a lot about how we are working with our community to make these things happen and ensuring that we're not making it harder, we're making it easier, because we like to have a party. So let's make it easier for everyone if we can. And I also thought the guide itself was laid out really, really well. It's easy to understand. It's very clear where to go for what sections, and it outlines a lot of information just in case people haven't thought about that in advance. So I thought this was really well done. And I'm going to recognize Councilmember Lilliquist. You had your hand up?
I did, and actually you already expressed some of my thoughts. I appreciate the fact that you don't just outline the rules, but you go a little bit further. You provide helpful guides about where people should go, some rules of thumb. It's not quite a how-to guide in having an event, but I think it helps people who are putting on an event to tells them all the things they need to consider. So I thought that was really a positive thing to do. I do have some kind of small questions, and I think you've probably already addressed it, but I want to confirm it. A year or so ago, we've had a couple of nonprofits who really complained about what they thought was kind of an onerous cost to them to provide security, especially if they wanted to have a beer garden for either private security or for off-duty police officers. And sometimes that expense was like, more than the rest of their entire budget, or so it seemed to them. Is that what you addressed with the different rate? Is the nonprofit rate truly a discount as opposed to cost recovery?
Yeah, this is probably the most complicated part of putting this together. And first of all, we really wanted to differentiate between a nonprofit and for-profit organization versus a commercial versus open event, because we all know that nonprofit organizations can host for-profit events. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear first. And then second of all, we really struggled with the beer garden issue in particular because, again, there's overlap there where it could be an open community event. Downtown Sounds is a great example of that, where a substantial part of the event is a beer garden, and that's also the cost and the revenue generator. So where we landed, and open to suggestions and discussion on this in particular, is continuing to charge that kind of reduced rate, but the beer garden portion will pay the full commercial part. So there could be situations where it's a little bit split. Yeah.
Councilmember Lilliquist.
Thanks. So one more question. Actually two. One, out and back race courses are prohibited. I don't understand why, but maybe you could tell me. I don't understand that. And then later on, we require $1 million insurance coverage for inflatable bouncy toys. I'm just wondering, is $1 million insurance policies easy and cheap to come by? It sounds like a lot to me, but you can get these for $10 somewhere?
I'll leave the insurance question to Matt Stamps.
I don't think I caught the full insurance question. I was listening. I just didn't.
Or if using inflatable play equipment, they must be powered independent city facilities, secured according to manufacturer specifications, and include an insurance endorsement in the amount of $1 million per occurrence, which lists the city of Bellingham as additional insured. Sounds like a great idea, but I don't know how difficult it is to get that insurance. Maybe it's standard.
So that is standard. And Matt, for the legal department, the insurance applies to all special events, period. So it's the $1 million coverage requirement, which is kind of the baseline coverage limit on a commercial general liability policy. And so you must be referencing the guide. I'm not familiar with that provision.
Yeah, I'm the guide.
So that's just a reference that general insurance requirement applies to those types of events as well.
Okay. And the there and back?
The out and back, I'll double check with the Parks Department, but I believe it's just because of the clearance of having people passing each other on a trail. I think it's a safety and capacity issue, especially since the trails remain open to the public. But I can ask for a little bit of clarification on that.
Any additional questions? Councilmember Barker.
So back to, because what I heard you answer Michael's question in reference to the fee schedule, what I understood from this is you weren't going to be necessarily considering nonprofit versus profit. It's if you're charging a fee for your event, then you're commercial. And if you're not, regardless of your profit, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah, it would be
that's the same as the
event-specific,
parks.
not
Okay.
organization, event organizer-specific.
Any additional questions? Okay, do you need any additional direction from us?
No, I think that's pretty
you guys are
clear.
heading in a great direction, so thank you for the work
Thank you.
you did.
Thank you very much.
All right, end of committee.